there you have it. Halfway through the second hole, snap. First hole went through nice and easy, but you can actually see the bit poking through. I torqued it just a tiny bit too hard and lost my bit inside the hole. I'm gonna have to grab that with some vice grips, hopefully, and yank it out of there. I don't know if I have another 4mm M4 tap. Gonna have to see. That sucks. How many times have you been here? Vice grips on the tip of the bit, sweating and hoping that the bit doesn't snap off. I hate tapping holes. Looks like I got lucky this time. I actually tapped it so deep that I might be able to get a shorter screw to grab this hole. It was a clean tap up until it snapped. I got a little too greedy on the forward turn. That sucks. Almost made it through. All right, I guess I'll test these out. Do the first one, do the good one first. Oh yeah. There we go. Clean. Clean. All right, here comes the problem child. See how deep I can get this. Wow. Starts off even cleaner than the first one. That might be enough to actually do it. Yeah, it looks like I win tonight. I gotta open up these holes in the breaker a little bit. They're leaning on the screws. I can't get them all the way down, but that's basically how it's gonna work. So originally I was gonna come from under the tub, through the tub and straight through this hole into the batteries. But I figure it's probably safer to put a breaker here, so I come through the tub and into the inside of the Jeep and then just sort of make a U-turn right here and in right here. And then this side will come down into the batteries. Well, here it is in all its glory. And I gotta say, this thing was a major pain to wire up, and that is something that sort of put me over the edge on the decision to whether or not to redo the tray. I was sort of teetering for a while because this one came out so nice, but wiring it, I learned sort of the downfall of my thinking in trying to make it compact as possible. I'm glad I made it compact. That was, my major goal, to make it as small and compact as possible. But the design doesn't really go along with the functionality of that. I'm reminded of the phrase "form follows function" from my days in college. Architect named Lewis Sullivan. Basically, the form of what you're creating should reflect exactly the function. Meaning, I shouldn't have gotten so carried away in, my logo and all this other stuff. I should have done a full mock-up and did the wiring fully to see how things were gonna fit together before I machined the tray. The problem is that the batteries are so close together now that I am having trouble I had trouble accessing the posts, the lower posts. See, this battery, the battery on the left, has the posts facing me, one on the top and one on the bottom. The battery on the right has the posts facing the back, one on the top and one on the bottom. And it's the bottom two posts that are problematic. The tray fits so tightly that you don't get a lot of play. So what I wound up having to do was mount the positive wire to this battery and the negative wire to this battery. Those are the two bottom ones. I had to mount those tightly onto the battery terminals first, and then once I got those mounted, I had to sort of fish them through my access hole back here, which is way too small for what I need. It's neat and tidy, but it's not nearly big enough, because the problem I was having is that once the wires are screwed down into the terminals, there's not a lot of play. I can't really, move the wires around all that much. So when I go to fit each battery into the tray, I have to also feed that wire through the access hole back here at the same time. And this negative wire was a pain in the butt to get through that hole and get the battery into this narrow tray, this narrow sort of groove in the tray at the same time. So I'm gonna need a much bigger hole back here. I just sketched something quickly what I'm gonna do for the tray 2.0, I guess I'll call this. Instead of having just the hole in the back plate here, this rectangular hole in the back plate, I'm gonna just cut that whole corner out. I'm gonna cut an L-shaped hole. And that way, when I go to, I'll be able to put the batteries in the tray first. I'll put the same thing on the front also. I'm gonna do away with the logo here. I'll put it somewhere else. Once I make the design more functional, then I'll worry about the logo and the design and all that stuff. But the idea with this is, once with this design, I'll be able to put the batteries in the tray first, and then put the wires to the terminals. And I'll be able to do that because, naturally, I have no access on the front, so I had to put the wire on first and then slide the battery in. But if I did something like this here, I'll be able to fit my Allen key inside here and get to the terminal. So once I get the batteries in the tray, then I can feed the wires in, line them up, and then, I'll probably tilt this back like this, and I'll have, quickly move that over, and I'll have an L-shaped hole here that'll extend from the front face down underneath like this, and that will give me access to that terminal down there through that hole. So I'll be able to, get in there and tighten the nut down on the wires once the batteries are already in. And I think that's going to be a lot more convenient when it comes time to bring these batteries in and out. A couple other things that need addressing also. One of them is the straps are grabbing onto the edges of these slots. In my specs that I sent the machine shop, I actually spec that these edges, I expect these edges to be broken, but the machine shop, language barrier, they speak Chinese, I speak English, and my notes are all in English. And so I was sort of translating through the Line app in a combination of English and Chinese, basically giving them the idea of what they need to do with my drawings. And so we missed that, and they didn't break those edges. So these straps are sort of grabbing onto the edges, and I'm not able to pull them as tight as I'd like to. They're still tight. These batteries aren't going anywhere, but there's a little bit of movement in there still, and I don't really like that. And I'm thinking that I might want to move my shunt up higher. So that would mean that this section here would be longer, and this would come up. I think I want to have my shunt level with the tops of the batteries. So when my negative wire comes out from my access hole here, it doesn't take such a hard turn. It's sort of more of a gradual turn up and bolts into the shunt, which is level here. And I just think that'll be cleaner, and I'll have a little bit more room to situate my breaker here. And the breaker, that's another thing that I changed sort of on the fly. Originally I had my wire from my isolator coming straight through the tub here, and it was going to go straight into it would come through this hole and come straight into this battery here. And I mean, obviously this battery is linked in parallel to this battery, so once this battery reaches full charge, then the charge will pass to this battery. But that would be, I can only imagine how annoying it would be to have to pull these out and have that one wire that's coming from this terminal through the tub and then around. I mean, I'm not going to have a whole lot of movement, so what I'm going to do is run that wire, instead of running it through the access hole and straight to that battery where I'm not going to be able to really reach it that easily, I'm going to run it through the tub and then into this side of the breaker here. And now I have this wire which goes to the positive terminal in that battery. That's going to loop around and that's going to go into this end of the breaker. So when I want to pull this out, all I really have to do is disconnect my line from the isolator to this end of the breaker, and then I'll be able to pull it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this and hook it up, and next weekend we're going to do a camping trip, and so that'll be my first camping trip with everything hooked up and running. I mean, and running and charging. The last camping trip I didn't have enough time. It was sort of last minute, so I managed to link the batteries together, but I didn't have them actually hooked to the isolator. I just sort of ratchet strapped them down in the back of the Jeep. You might have seen from the last video. So this coming camping trip, I'll be fully loaded and charging. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm probably going to go on a couple more camping trips with this setup the way it is, and just sort of take mental notes of, what worked and what was an issue. And at that point, I'll be able to redesign the tray from a standpoint of, clarity. All right, I'm going to try and explain this as clearly as possible without rambling. But if you can see these two arrows here, that is an indication that my battery bank is getting a charge, is receiving a charge. And so that means that my battery isolator up under the hood is working properly. Now that the ignition is on and the Jeep is running, the alternator's running, and my starter battery is topped off, it's fully charged, the isolator that is wired into this red line here is sensing that the main battery, the starter battery, is fully charged, so it's letting a charge pass through that the starter battery along this red line and into my breaker down here and out the other end of the breaker and into my battery bank. So that will continue as long as the Jeep is running, theoretically. When I turn the ignition off, which I'll do in a second, the isolator will recognize that and it will disengage. It'll disconnect my battery bank from my starter battery, so that when I draw charge from my battery bank, it doesn't also draw a charge through that same network of wiring up to my starter battery and potentially kill my starter battery after a certain amount of time. So I'm gonna shut the ignition off now, and we'll see what the battery monitor does. Okay, so as it stands right now. Yeah, so the arrows are gone. They blipped for a second. I don't know if that's some sort of electronic glitch or I don't know. So the monitor is showing now that the charge is cut off. So the battery bank right now is sort of, it's out on its own. So whatever I'm drawing from, whatever power I'm drawing is being drawn from just the battery bank and not from my starter battery, because the isolator has disconnected the circuit between the two. All right, so I got a new game plan as usual. This is the high power line from my Switch-Pros RCR-Force 12. Now, these lines are good for 35 amps a piece. So if you gang two together, you get 70 amps. So the rear subs that I have built into my back seat, excuse the upholstery, I haven't fixed it yet, but these rear subs are, they draw 60 amps a piece. So that's 120. So what I'm thinking is I gang two of these wires together to power one of the subs and two of these wires together to power the other sub. And then I can get rid of the breaker that I have mounted in the engine compartment. So what I'm gonna do is, being that the Switch-Pros has built-in breakers, and you don't use any of that, the breakers and the fuses and all that stuff, it's all built into the Switch-Pros. So I'm gonna wire this into some, I'm gonna wire these, I'm gonna cut these short, I think, and wire them into a positive power block, a nice, hefty 120 amp power block. And so I'll group all four lines into that power block and then run one single 4-gauge wire from that power block back here to, and then split it into the two amps. And I think that should give me better performance with the amps, and it'll also be safer because I'm fused properly, to what it should be according to the spec. All right, it kind of sucks, but I'm about to cut up this brand new bus bar that I just bought. But here's my plan. I know that the Switch-Pros calls for their module to wire directly to the battery, but I'm hoping that, since I'm not putting a huge draw on it, I'll be able to get away with this. So I'm gonna wire the Switch-Pros to this distribution block instead of to the directly to the battery like they call for. I'm gonna test it out first and see how it works. But so this is the plan. This stud here is gonna run to about 6 inches up to my battery, and then on this same stud I'm gonna bring my Switch-Pros hot wire in, the heavy wire. And on this stud here, this is gonna go out to my battery isolator and out to my starter. So this half of the bus bar will be positively charged, from this stud directly to the battery. And then I'm gonna divide this bar into two. So this side is gonna be disconnected from this side. And this side, I'm gonna run from my Switch-Pros, the heavy gauge harness is gonna come, so that switches 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're gonna come in on this stud. I'm gonna put this stud back in. These are kind of neat. They have Allen heads on this side, so they just screw down from behind. But so I'm gonna bring all my 1, 2, 3, and 4 terminals or wires onto this terminal here, and then from there, so that's going to carry power across this half of the bar to this terminal here, which is going to go out with 4-gauge wire to my amps in the back. So I'm going to test it out. Obviously, I'm going to test it out first and make sure it works. But if it does work, the idea is to mount this back here on the sidewall so I can clean up all all of these wires here. So when I'm done, the only wires coming to this terminal will be one wire, that 5 or 6 inch length of 4-gauge wire that's going to go to the box. And then on this side, I'll have the wires from the PDC and the wire to my winch in the front. Voila! There you have it. 5/16 inch aluminum spacer. Still got to clean it up a little bit, but I was able to cut that out of the bottom corner of this old belly skid I have lying around. This is probably the half-dozen time that I've been able to steal aluminum off of that and my old corner armor cutouts for the wheels. But so the way this works is there's this annoying little lip along here, and then there's this valley right here before it pops up again to here. And so I needed something to fit and fill this valley, so I can mount my distribution block on the wall flush. So this is just the right size to fit in that valley. So that'll fit basically like that. And so all my wires will come up from underneath and grab onto these lugs. And then this lug here will come out and up to my battery terminal here. So I just couldn't bring myself to cut this brand new power distribution block into 2 separate bars, so I called an audible. What I did was I took that harness, I think I showed a picture of it. I took that shortened harness for switches 1 through 4 and just ran that down to this block down here on the right lug here. And then from the left lug, right now I just have the original 8-gauge wire that I was running, but I'm going to switch this to a 2-gauge with a nice thick copper attachment here. I'm not really worried about shorting these out, being that they're out in the open like this, because my battery tray is going to be on top of all this. So it's not like I'm going to be in here with a wrench poking around, taking any chances of shorting anything out. But I do want to put some rubber boot. I'm going to get some rubber boots for these two lugs just to give me a little added protection. But when this is done, I'll have the 2-gauge coming off of here and running down in place of that 8-gauge through my channel and all the way back into my 2 subs back here. So that's a wrap on this update. The distribution block is in and it's been there for 2 weeks. I haven't had any problems, any side effects, so I'm going to leave it there. I had to step away from the project again to take care of my air conditioning. That's been much needed. But unfortunately, halfway through that process, I caught COVID. So stay tuned for the next video. I cover all that and some fun times. Doing a good job?